Welcome to the Everything Saxophone Podcast, the place for saxophone interviews, reviews, and news. I'm Donna Schwartz.
And I'm Nick Manella, and we're your hosts, bringing you your weekly dose of saxophone. And now let's get into the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Everything Saxophone Podcast. I am Nick Manella. Thank you so much for joining us for this brand new episode. And thanks to everybody out there that has checked out all the episodes so far. We really appreciate you guys, and hopefully we're bringing you some great guests here, some great conversations, and hopefully bringing you some value, when it comes to talking about the saxophone and picking the brains of some of the best players out there. That's really what we're trying to do here. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. We're starting to pick up steam as a podcast. We're getting more people on board every single week. So make sure you tell your friends, tell your fellow saxophone players, tell your students, tell your family, tell everybody that this podcast is out there, and we are going to be coming out with a brand new interview each and every week to get this thing going. So this week I'm bringing you my interview with Walter Smith III, and I am so excited about you guys hearing this because Walter is one of my favorite saxophone players of all time. His new material that's been coming out, his latest album, Twio, and some of his other albums are just, they get worn out in my CD player and my record player and all my digital devices. I just love this guy's music. I love the way he plays the saxophone. And he also happens to be one of the coolest guys I've ever had the pleasure of talking to. This interview is awesome. Walter keeps it so light and funny, and you're going to see, I talked to him about some of the stuff that he does that just makes me kind of roll on the floor laughing. He's just a great guy all around and happens to be like one of the most killer players on earth today when it comes to jazz and saxophone. So totally excited about this interview. Before we get into it, it is time for shout out of the week. As you guys might know, we are a brand new podcast, and one of the things that really helps us to get out into the world and find more listeners like you is if you go on iTunes and you leave us a rating and review. So this week's shout out goes out to RJP1666. He says, "This is a great podcast dedicated solely to the saxophone and the people who play them. Great info and very entertaining. Any player would do well to subscribe." Well, thank you, RJP. We're really trying to bring you that value. And I think you're right. Anybody that plays the instrument or anybody that doesn't play the saxophone, this is a great way to hear directly from some of our heroes on the saxophone and our heroes in music. So thanks for that shout out. And if all of you out there can take 1 minute out of your day, head over to iTunes, leave us a rating and review. Go on to Facebook, search for Everything Saxophone Podcast. Give us a like so that you can keep up on everything. And then if you head over to our website, saxophonepodcast.com, you can find a bunch of really cool stuff. You can find links to all of our guests' web pages and everything that they have going on. You can also find a playlist dedicated solely to the artist. I'm going to be making one for Walter, so you can check out a bunch of his music, check out the album that we talk about in this episode, and see everything that's going on. While you're there, you can also sign up for our mailing list, which will keep you abreast of everything that's going on here at the podcast. You'll get notifications for new episodes and anything else cool that we're putting out. So make sure you head over to the website. That's a great spot to take care of a bunch of different stuff and just kind of browse our past episodes and all that good stuff. All right, without further ado, let's get into the interview with Walter. I know you guys are going to love this one. Enjoy. So I think the first thing I got to ask you about is your Instagram account, man. I mean, I think it's like one of the best musician Instagram accounts I've ever seen. Where'd you get the idea for like all this hilarious stuff you're doing, like the mouthpiece pictures and the little like mock music lessons?
Man, I think with all that social media stuff. I think the whole point of it, at least to me, is just to kind of have fun with it and be less serious. So those are all things that I've been doing, and those are like the PG things, as far as like random prank stuff and all that. But like, I think that's more interesting, and what I would like to see out of someone's page. If I'm going to go visit it, I don't necessarily want to see a gig announcement for your gig in Croatia, and I don't live there. I can't come to it anyway, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I just think it's more fun, and it's for, as far as like everyone for having to be on social media, at least I can like stomach it if I'm doing something random like that.
Right. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I really enjoy it, and it's just like a little bit of, kind of brevity in the world of social media, where you're just seeing like people just playing or like trying to put their best foot forward and only show like the best of what they can do. It's just, I just laugh my ass off every time I see anything that you post, man.
Well, that's the point. I appreciate it, man.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It also doesn't hurt that any video I've ever had of me playing sounds totally awful. So because I don't have that kind of stuff, I just make up stupid things to put there.
Well, it's great. I'm loving it. So I noticed too, like a lot of your online presence, and you kind of just explained it, but a lot of it is just downright funny, man. Like from some of those joke interviews that I've seen on YouTube to like your new album promo and all that kind of stuff. Is it just, are you always trying to think of like funny things to put online? Is that kind of your avenue towards promotion? Or
but man, it's not even that serious. It's just like when it comes time to do something, those are the only ideas I have. And the funny thing about it is that I'm also really against YouTube and people putting up clips of performances and videos of people playing, like as far as what I'm involved with. Right. So the weird part about it is that I have an alert that lets me know when something new has gone up on YouTube. So like when there's a tour happening, I will constantly be putting copyright infringement notices to get that stuff taken down. Mm-hmm. And what the result is that then the only stuff that is on YouTube of me is either really random silly stuff that I'm putting there as promotional stuff, or it's like really terrible stuff that I can't get taken down. So in a way, I've kind of boxed myself into this weird existence of like total online garbage. But that is the world we live in.
Yeah, right. Like that is the world we live in. How tough is it to keep up with like people putting up unauthorized footage of your gigs, or trying to even put, I see all the time people just rip recordings and put them right up on YouTube for everybody to listen to. Is it a lot to keep up with?
It is and it isn't. Like at a certain point, you just kind of end up giving up and just kind of throwing your hands in the air and being like, all right, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes when you look at it, though, it's just like, why does this have to be here? And like you said, people putting up unauthorized versions of albums, like I hate all that stuff. I think for me, I kind of grew up in the 90s and saw all these, I spent all my money buying CDs, and was like, when my first album came out, it was like right when CD stores were dying. And all I ever wanted was to like go through Tower Records and see that little name plate with my CD there. That was like exciting. And now to kind of, like my last album, where I wrote all the music, Still Casual, and this one, both ended up being online like weeks before the album was released. And like all that kind of piracy stuff. And it's just like at a certain point you can't control what's happening. So Spotify and YouTube and all that stuff, it all is kind of, I don't know, it's like a really negative thing towards how music is consumed and how people don't really value it or appreciate it anymore the same way. So on the one hand, every now and then I get into those things where I'm like, all right, all this stuff has to come down, and I'm like actively taking it down. And then when I get through about an hour of doing that, I'm just like, you know what? Who cares? If I get this down, there's going to be another 20 things up there tomorrow. So it's that kind of thing. You just throw your hands up in there and be like, you know what? Whatever.
Well, it's kind of cool. It's kind of actually refreshing to hear you, like, to hear that you're actually thinking about that, because I think a lot of people just feel so defeated by the fact that you can't control it easily that, like you said, they kind of just throw their hands up. But it's, I don't know, I think it's cool that you're really thinking about the integrity of, like, I made an album, I put a lot of work into it, and, you know, I'm going to try to control it as much as I can. So kudos to you, man.
Oh, thank you.
Now, I have one more question about, like, social media stuff, and, like, this was the first question I wrote when I knew I was going to interview you. Were you really on Law and Order?
Man, that is an actual thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, one of the most random. I finished a gig somewhere, and when I walked off the stage, I had all these missed calls and missed FaceTime calls from Taylor Ikesty. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, man, what happened? Like, did something happen? And I call him, and he's like, what is this? How did this happen? You know, like that. Like, he was like really excited. I was like, man, what are you talking about? He's like, don't pretend like you don't know what, and I was just like, what happened? And then he sent me this video of like what was going on, and it's pretty random. I got a lot of emails from a lot of people saying, man, have you seen this yet? Have you seen this? So random. And I have no clue where it came from or why it happened, but it's great that it did.
That's so crazy, man. So you knew nothing about it before it came out?
I still don't have any explanation really, other than, you know, living in LA, every now and then people, you know, all those random worlds collide. So it could have been someone at a gig that's a writer or something like that was just like, oh yeah, saw this guy, I'll just write that down.
Yeah, I guess so. If anybody doesn't know what we're talking about, you got to go to Walter's Instagram account, and he did a cool little thing for his album promo where Ice-T is on the stand on Law and Order, and he actually mentions Walter Smith III's name on the show. It's really amazing. I almost thought it was fake when I saw it, man.
No, man, trust me.
Yeah.
I would not blame you if you did. The funny thing is, I would like to one day. I'm gonna like actually watch the episode and like find out what Ice-T's character's name is and all that kind of information. And I'm going to put that in my bio as a quote from his character. He's the next Coltrane.
Oh, yeah, you got to do that, man.
Yeah, it's going to happen eventually.
That's great. So let's go back to the beginning a little bit for you. I love the opening line of your bio on your website. It says, my first gig was playing at a McDonald's in Houston with another saxophone player. I took a solo on Blue Bossa. It was terrible. People clapped, and I figured if I could get away with that and get applause, how could I fail? And I think that's an awesome quote because, you know, I think if more people had that kind of reaction to this very serious music that we all play, the world might be a better place. Is that still how you kind of think about playing music in the saxophone?
Absolutely, man. I mean, you know, at a certain point, you know, it's fun, you know, and at least for me, I'm always trying to enjoy myself. So much of the work that you do is solitary. You're in your practice room for 10 hours, writing music or learning stuff or working on some kind of tedious exercise. And then you go from that to the airport, and then you fly from LA 11 hours to Europe, 12 hours to Europe, and you're tired and all that kind of stuff. If you don't find a way to have fun with it, then it's like there's no point in doing it, because it's not like a relaxing existence in any way.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. I think that's totally true. It's like a whole bunch of work, and then when you get a chance to put that work on display, sometimes it doesn't always go the way that you want it to, but you've got to find a way around that, or else you're going to give up pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think also, you know, it's, you know, there's so much negativity or surrounding music sometimes, where this person doesn't like how that person plays, or, this person doesn't like how this person writes, or I hate his sound, like all that kind of stuff. It just seems, like we're all entitled to our opinion, and those opinions help shape how we play or how we write. And those are actually very good things to be aware of, things that you're not a fan of in someone's playing, but like to make that like a public thing of just like bringing negative vibe all over the place. It doesn't really serve anybody. And to me, at least, I try to avoid those situations. So even when, you play and the concert doesn't feel the way you want it to go, that's okay. There's another one tomorrow night, and we'll, maybe I'll get it right then.
Right. That's a great attitude, man. Well, so give me an idea of what it was like growing up in Houston and starting to play the saxophone. I mean, what brought you to that first McDonald's gig? How did you get into it?
Well, and this is the even funnier part of it. So my dad, my parents are from New Orleans, and they both got teaching positions in Houston. My mom was a high school English teacher, and my dad taught elementary band. And so there was this summer workshop, and it was called the Summer Jazz Workshop. And a lot of the great musicians in Houston would teach there, and all the young students, I mean, like, they would all attend it. And it would, you do performances around town, and they would have classes in improv and music business and all that stuff. So I was in that in maybe sixth grade, I think, something like that, or fifth grade. I don't remember exactly when I started, but one of the things we were playing there was Blue Bossa, and we had a big band arrangement or something of it, and everybody had to take a solo on something. So my dad, who was a saxophonist when he was growing up, he wrote out a solo for me on Blue Bossa, and like I memorized this solo, and had no, I didn't know anything about how it worked or what it sounded like, other than just that I sat down and memorized it, one chorus. And this solo in the Summer Jazz Workshop became like a thing. I would just get up. They would be like, Walter. And I would get up and play this thing. And hopefully I started on the right beat, because then it all would fit, that kind of thing. Yeah. And then there was this saxophone player that was at one of the concerts, and he saw me play that solo and was under their impression that like I was like actually knew what was happening and all that kind of stuff. So he invited me to come sit in at his gig at McDonald's.
Wow.
And it was like him and a keyboard player at playing duo, like, smooth jazz stuff at a McDonald's. And I went, and he was like, "Oh, let's hear Blue Bossa." And I sat in on it. And, I think I did not start it on the right beat time, because there were no drums. It was, I never played with just piano, and it was awful, man. But like, people were into it just because I was a little kid. So it worked out.
Oh, that's great.
Very random.
That's
humble beginnings, man.
Yeah, right, for sure. So like Houston really seems to have like something in the water, man. I mean, from like you and Robert Glasper, Chris Dave, Eric Harland, I'm sure there's countless others, but I mean, what is it about Houston that just keeps churning out these amazing musicians?
Well, we have a lot of drummers that are from there, and a lot of that, there's a pretty specific lineage of guys that they studied with. One of them is Craig Green, who was a band director at the middle school I went to. And he had a stage band there, and I believe Eric Harland went there, and Chris Dave went there. All these guys, Mark Simmons, they went there and went on to the Performing Arts High School. But there's also a big gospel music scene, and they get to play a lot at a young age, and music is kind of just not, at least at the time, it wasn't necessarily something, from what I've gathered from talking to them, that they were like in school for. They just already played and enjoyed playing, but they went to schools that fostered that creativity, and then they learned about swing and like jazz stuff, and kind of got that along the way. But the drums were always at the forefront of what they were doing. So for drums, there is that tradition. When I got to the Performing Arts High School, the first person I met, there was an ice cream social like the week before school, so you could meet some of the new students. And Kendrick Scott was there, and that's where I kind of met him. And I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's incredible. Yeah, you should know Kendrick. And he's like great drummer. And so we were both in the same grade going into school. And there was also a bass player that started with us, Mark Kelly, who plays with the Roots now. And there was a trumpet player, LaRon Thomas, an incredible songwriter, all these guys. And then the year ahead of us was Mike Moreno and Robert Glasper. And, everybody was just kind of serious about sounding good because everybody could kind of play a little bit. But like at the time, I remember Mike Moreno was like the guy who everybody was trying to catch up to because he was transcribing all these tunes. He had like 5,000 CDs. He was writing music, all that kind of stuff. So, we were all being pushed by each other to do that. And then I remember they went off to college. Mike and Robert went to the new school, and Kendrick and Mark were still in high school, and we were always talking to them and, oh man, how is it? How do you like New York? And blah, blah, blah. And I remember one time talking to Robert, he's like, man, I was walking down the street today and I met Wagyu Miller. I was like, because, in Houston, nobody really came there to play.
Right.
It wasn't like on the tour circuit. So we saw a handful of concerts, but mainly we would, we just knew about people from records and all that kind of stuff. So when they got to New York, it was just like even more exciting. And, Eric Harland would come back at Christmas time and he was playing with Betty Carter at the time. And, we were little kids, but he was like, man, yeah, y'all got to keep playing and blah, 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 blah. Make sure you learn this. Make sure you listen to this. And, he was on an album with Greg Osby, he and Jason Moran at some point, and we all had that and learned all the music from it. It was just like, there was a lot of inspiration that was directly tied to being at the school we were at and being in that time in Houston. So it was kind of like, you could see someone that had just been there within the last 7-8 years doing stuff that was really exciting with music, as opposed to just kind of going off by yourself and being like, well, I don't know exactly what a career looks like, but let me just work and see. There was like strength in numbers. So it was cool and in that way.
Well, that's really cool, man. I know. So how does that thing work in Houston? Like, how does the performing arts high school work? Is that something that you can choose to go to, at a certain point where music is something that you're really going to be pursuing on a more serious level? Like, I'm really interested to know how it works in that city and how you get to go to a school like that, which sounds like it was so amazing.
Well, in the Houston district, and I may be slightly incorrect, but I'm pretty sure that every high school in the district had a specialty like that. It was the performing arts school, and we shared buses with the health profession school. And there was an aviation school. There was, like whatever. And they all were high schools with this concentration. So you had to kind of pick one of them. And a lot of the people, to be fair, at the art school, we had dance, theater, visual art. What else? It seems like I'm missing something, but whatever it is. But that within that kind of thing, there are a lot of people that I went to school with that are not pursuing careers in it. They were just at the time interested in doing it. So you had, it's like anywhere else. You have people that are at the top end of it, and then people that are kind of just there, but they enjoy doing it. But once the school thing was over, that was kind of the end of it for them. But basically, to go to that school, 9th grade through 12th grade, it was just an audition. And if you got in, you were in. Had to keep your grades at a certain thing, but otherwise it was normal.
Man, that seems like entirely too practical for a school system to have all these kind of, specialty areas. That sounds like a really great place to grow up.
Yeah, it is cool, definitely. And it does make sense. But as I was saying it to you, it felt like I might have been lying. But I know that there are several of them, and they were like randomly specific as far as what kind of thing was their specialty. But yeah.
So like tracing after you got out of school and still continued to pursue music, like I feel like a lot of people they learn somebody like yours name when they're playing with, you know, a Roy Haynes, or when they're playing with these huge names, but they never really think about like the process on how did you meet these folks and ultimately end up, you know, playing with them. Can you talk a little bit about like how did you meet Roy Haynes, or how did you meet some of these guys that you got to play with that ultimately kind of kicked your career off?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I know to be true for myself is that I've just been lucky as far as all those things are concerned, and in a way have led like a very charmed musical life. Uh, you know, there've always been people that I've known that I feel like I looked at them like, man, this guy or this girl, this is going to be like the next thing, and they're going to be playing with everybody. And every time I would get one of those opportunities, it was just like, man, it's true. It's just like I just happened to be friends with this guy, and he was in a situation where they needed somebody, and he recommended me, and that was like it. So, for instance, in the case of Roy Haynes, when I was in Boston, there was a great bass player there by the name of John Sullivan, and he was at New England Conservatory. And between Berklee and NEC, it's only a couple blocks away, and a lot of the musicians at NEC and Berklee, you know, get together and play gigs and all that kind of stuff. And I had the opportunity to play a lot with John Sullivan, who was over there at the time, and then he moved to New York and was in Roy Haynes' band. And I don't know how he joined that band, but he was in it with Marcus Strickland and Martin Bejarano. They had a band called Fountain of Youth, and they did an album. And around the time I moved to New York, Marcus was starting to play with Tane, and he had a band, and he was like missing some of the Roy gigs, and Roy wanted somebody that was going to be there for all the gigs. So he asked them for recommendations, and that's how it came up. I was new in town. Mm-hmm. John recommended me. I went over to Roy's house and did like an audition, and he was like, cool. So it all kind of worked out. But every one of the situations has been like somebody that I knew, or just the person I'm playing with, I just happen to be friends with. It's all kind of recommendations and all that kind of stuff that has just worked out in my favor.
I mean, it's well deserved, but you're right. It does take a little bit of luck, I imagine.
A lot.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like I said, for every even while I was doing those concerts or those gigs or tours, whatever records, I would think about like, man, if this person was on this would be incredible right now. Mm-hmm. Like someone other than me, because I could always picture what they would do that would be so much better. And it's just like that kind of thing. So it is all about luck.
That's cool. That's good to hear, because it's like, you know, you can work your butt off, and then you just have to be in the right situation at the right time. So I know that you live in California now.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, interesting. So why choose California as a base of operations instead of New York? Just because, like, I always think about New York as sort of the center of the jazz world, and I know that you're playing with a lot of the guys that live in New York City. So what is it about California that keeps you there?
Well, it has nothing to do with music. It was just my wife is from LA, and when I lived in New York, she was potentially going to move there, but because my plans were to just be gone all the time, mm-hmm. you know, it wasn't really fair to have her move there and then not know anybody and then me be gone, because that was just ridiculous. So it made more sense for me to move to LA and to try and do it from there, mm-hmm. which was kind of a daunting thing. And at first, and especially speaking of like Roy Haynes, that I ended up getting fired because I moved to Los Angeles because he wanted everyone to be based in New York. Mm. So, you know, I think one of those things, and why I've stayed there, is just because of like the quality of life is great. We have a house out there, and we have kids now, and we live near her parents, and they have like a real family um, set up there and great schools and all that kind of stuff. And it just seems so much more relaxed and manageable than what I see in New York for that kind of lifestyle. Um, and, also, I think I can appreciate New York more not living there because I go a lot and, just there for 2-3 days and then I'm out, and I really enjoy those visits now in a way that I don't know that I would enjoy if I still lived there. Like sometimes I feel like when I'm in New York, I'm getting people to come out of their house, hey man, let's go to Smalls. Let's go. I have tomorrow night off. Let's go do, and I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. And whereas normally, just like normal life, when you live there, I live in LA. I don't go to Disneyland every day or go to the tar pit, that kind of thing. So they just don't, you're out so much. You don't want to be in that scene the whole time. So for me, it's still fun. Like I almost have that feeling of like when I was first visiting there where it's still exciting. And it's just because it's not in my backyard all the time.
So that kind of brings us to today and your new album, Twio. So can you tell us a little bit about the album and, what was your headspace like going into it? And I mean, the band is just ridiculous. You've got a bunch of just the heaviest guys in the world on this record. So tell us a little bit about it.
For a long time, and I think with most people, you have a similar experience. You start out learning standards and music from all these different composers, but then, at least for me, everybody that I've ever played with, it's been about writing original music and really fostering that kind of, progression as far as like advancing your own compositional techniques and trying to find something different and having a vibe and a point of view. And that's what I've been into for the last, I don't know, however long I've been playing. But this has always been something that I always thought like, well, man, I spent like all these years learning all these tunes. At one point I knew like 400 or 500 tunes. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, man, I want to do something with that. But it never felt like the right time to do it. And in the last year, I started teaching at Indiana University. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you do when you're teaching is that you kind of connect with students on a common language. So that ends up being dealing with more standards, and also they have stuff that they have to work on as far as juries and all that kind of stuff. So, for the last several years in my part-time teaching and now full-time teaching, it's just been like this thing that I get and I really enjoy doing, but only at school. So never in like a live concert. So when it came time to actually put this together, I couldn't even really stomach the idea of just playing the tunes. I was like, no, I gotta reharm these and gotta do this and gotta do that. And I came up with all these arrangements of the tunes that were kind of, some of them were actually pretty good, and I will do something with them later on, but it was not really like playing standards. It was just like playing an original tune. So just went and backtracked and picked a bunch of songs that I thought could just stand on their own and, that were lesser played, and just basically had a jam session with those cats and had fun playing. Everything that's on the record is kind of like a first take. I think there's one thing that's a second take. Wow. One of the ones with Josh, just because it was shorter. Yeah. But not for any other reason than that. So we did maybe 2 takes of everything, and that was it. Because there's no chance of making a mistake. Nobody's gonna miss a coda. Nobody's gonna forget that the second time we go to that melody, it's an 11. It's just play it. Simple. So
that's
really
cool,
kind of
man.
what the.
I think it comes through on the record that you guys are just like kind of hanging out, having a session, and nobody's like sweating too hard. You guys are definitely all playing to extremely high level, but like you can just kind of hear it that it's like, all right, we're just having fun doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, and I gotta mention this too. I love that video that you put up of the email that you sent to Christian McBride. And I thought that was the best thing ever. He thought that was so
Man,
crazy.
that was so funny, like having that conversation with him and then reviewing the video afterwards and him saying it there too. Like he still didn't believe me. I think when we got to the studio, he was just kind of like, all right, so what? Let me see these two, like that kind of stuff. And
Right.
I was like, what do you want me to bring? I kept asking him because it seemed like he wanted me to bring him music. And he's like, no, I know all the songs, but just, I don't know what you have in mind. And I was like, man, listen, just play the song. That's it. Nothing special.
That's
He
great.
didn't believe me.
So why'd you choose Christian McBride and Joshua Redmond have, you welcome them onto the record as guests. Why those two guys besides the actual band that you were playing with on the record?
Well, initially, I think the idea was just to do it as a trio with Christian and Eric.
Oh, okay.
And then we're going to have Josh as a guest on 2 tracks.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the initial album that was done. And then the day that we finished, I don't know exactly how long it was, but I think it was like we finished the album. We did it on a Tuesday in New York at Sear Sound. And then I think on the next, like 2 days later, on Thursday, we went to Japan with Eric Harland's band, Voyager, which is with Harish and Taylor Eichste. Julian Lodge didn't make that tour, so we just did it quartet. And one of the nights after we played, we were invited to go to this session somewhere in Tokyo, and we went, and but only Harish, me and Eric went to the session. Oh. And when we walked in, they were like, "Oh, would you guys like to play a song?" And we went up and played trio, and we just played like a blues or something. But the difference in the vibe and the energy was something that I also was like, man, I kind of feel like this should be on there too. Mm. And in a way, when I thought about it, I was like, and this would also be a little bit more representative of what the live versions of these songs are going to be like. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be as like kind of contained as some of the stuff on the album. So the next week I was going to New York for another recording, and we got a day. Eric Harland has a new studio, or his partners in a studio in Manhattan, GSI, mm-hmm. and they had just opened that day. So we went in for, I think, an hour and a half, and just did a couple tracks. And those are the ones that with Harish on the album. Oh, wow. So it just kind of represents like another approach to playing some of them, but that's a little bit more interactive and less traditional, I guess. Not in a bad or a good way, just something other than what the other record was like. Right. So then it was just a matter of kind of putting the tracks together, and Chris Dunn, who's a great friend, and he ended up producing the album, and he was like, I've got the solution. You should make it where Christian is also a guest in addition to Josh, and then it can be the trio plus 2 of them as guests. And it worked perfectly.
Yeah, I love Josh's playing on it so much. Like, you guys just fit so well together, and the way that you guys play off of each other, like on the trail, just a fantastic combination of you guys, blowing together.
Well, man, it's easy for me because I know all of his solos.
Oh, there you go.
That's like, I grew up idolizing that dude. He was like one of the big 3 for me growing up in high school and all that. So I know everything he's ever done. So
cool. Who were the other members of the big 3 for you?
In high school, it was him, Branford, and Kenny Garrett. It was like those 3. And soon added to that Mount Rushmore, like I think around the 11th or 12th grade, when I was starting to understand a little more, was Mark Turner. So it was like those guys.
So still talking about the album, like your albums, they consistently get a lot of buzz around them. So like you're usually like in the top 10 in iTunes, and you're on all of those big jazz playlists on Spotify. Is there something that you do like promotion wise to really push your album out there, or is it just the albums have been really successful on their own? I'm interested to hear your take on that.
Man, not really. Yeah, it's kind of random. I think one of the things is that I generally have a cycle of about 3 or 4 years in between albums.
Okay.
So there's not like a a surplus of things coming out. Sometimes I think you can get lost in what someone's current thing is just because they're more productive than I am.
Mm-hmm.
So being mostly a sideman, every now and then I get either the itch to do it or the opportunity to do it, and I kind of go with that. But one of the things that I'm working towards now, and we'll see, I can answer this question again in like a year from now and see, because I'm trying to be a little bit more productive in the next couple years, trying to do 1 or 2 things every year. So we'll see how that goes, if they just kind of fall by the wayside or if they actually do something.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, making an album is just so much work. And I was interviewing Noah Preminger a couple weeks ago, and that dude's putting out like 4 albums this year. And I just, I couldn't understand how he was doing it all. So it's interesting to hear from your side too, where it's like a little bit fewer and far in between.
Yeah, Noah's a bad dude too. And I heard one of his albums, he has like a duo, and I can't remember what composer's music they were playing, but it sounds incredible on there. Yeah, he's a bad dude. But there are a lot of people that do that. Like people I look at, like I don't know if you are. It's kind of even like underground. Like Jason Moran has put out like 4 or 5 records in this year as well. Like, and now that he's doing them on his own, he's just kind of like, he has an idea, he puts the project together, and then he puts it out, and it's not like this big ceremonious release, but also that's intentional. He's just trying to put more music out there. And I know Dave Douglas does a couple every year. Greg Osby was prolific with his stuff. There are just certain people that do that. Dana Stevens also, man, he has like 7 or 8 records in the last couple of years, and I think it's really cool to have that kind of output.
Yeah, man. Speaking of Dana, that guy is like, I don't know. I feel like I've just discovered him, even though I've been listening to him for a while. That he's one of the best saxophone players I've ever heard, man.
Dana Stevens?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
he's like the first. Kendrick was the first person I met when I was in high school, and Dana's the first person I met when I got to Berklee.
Wow.
He was riding his bike down the street and was like stopped at the corner right in front of the Mass Ave Berklee building. Pretty funny.
That's great. So I like to shift gears a little bit, and I've got to ask at least one question for all the gearheads out there. So first of all, like how important is the equipment that you use to your sound, and do you think about gear a lot, or is it something where you just like find something that you think works and you just stick with it?
Yeah. The latter. Man, I've just been talking to Ben Wendell, and like he's in this crisis of mouthpieces, and he's like going through. I could not go down that rabbit hole. I think the horn I have now, I got it. Maybe in 2001, something like that, and I've not really been looking for another horn. I played another one that I liked better, but the guy didn't want to sell it. So other than that, I just kind of don't try anything, just to stay with what I have. Right. As far as mouthpieces, around that same time, I bought an Otto Link that I played for probably about 10 years. And then I hooked up with Fred LaBelle, and he made me a few mouthpieces about 4 years ago. And I switched to that, and that's the only thing that I've been interested in playing. Yeah. Same with reeds. I just recently switched to Van Doren. That was like a big switch for me to change the style of reed. But like they're great, and when it works, like you said, I don't want to look for anything else. I'm kind of content. Anything after that, I just need to improve as a saxophonist. Right. If I'm going to get any better, there's nothing that's going to happen for me switching.
Yeah, and it's almost hard, like, well, especially these days, like you were saying with social media and just everything that gets blasted at you all the time, to like hide from a lot of the new stuff that's out there and a lot of the, advertising that's coming at you, man. It's actually harder to just stick with the gear that you have and not try a whole bunch of stuff.
It absolutely is. But, I have a couple things that work in my favor on that. Like my mouthpiece pushes down on my cork so much that I never take the mouthpiece off.
Uh-huh.
So that allows me to never try a horn because I don't want to take the mouthpiece off or ever try a mouthpiece. It's like, it's kind of stuck, and that's what I got to do.
That's hilarious.
I was at the Gen conference in January, and I had just started with Van Doren. I went by the booth, and they had mouthpieces. They have this new large chamber tenor mouthpiece, and I wanted to try it, but I was like, man, I can't take this mouthpiece off. And they were like, well, man, we'll figure out a way. And luckily, next to them, there was a repair booth, and I was like, do you guys put corks on? And they were like, yeah, we could do that. So I took my mouthpiece off, and that was the first time it had come off in years.
Wow.
And so I tried the new mouthpiece, and it was cool. And then I was like, all right, now can you give me a new cork? And then I put mine back on there, and then that was the move.
Wow. Okay. So if you have an addiction to buying mouthpieces, just never take your mouthpiece off of your horn, and that will cure it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even when you're super out of tune, when you have to play with guitar and all that stuff, no, it's okay. It'll keep you from searching for more gear.
That's right. Just leave it on there. Nice, man. All right. Yeah. Well, I've got 5 questions that I like to ask everybody who comes on the show, and I think it's just really interesting to hear all the different answers I get to these. So the first one is, what is one educational material that you feel like you couldn't live without? And this could be like something that you use for your own education or something that you give to students, just like in the educational arena.
Okay. Well, for me, specifically, the thing that probably why I'm still playing now is the Charlie Parker Omnibook, the E-flat version.
Okay.
And just because those are the actual notes that he played.
Yeah.
And that was something that it's not written out like a instructional text. Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't explain anything about what's happening, but they have chord symbols written in there and all the transcriptions, and you can find the records. I bought, I tracked down a lot of those when I was young. I had that in middle school when I was playing alto, and it was just like a wealth of information that pushed me towards figuring out how all this stuff worked harmonically. I would listen to the record and be like, wow, that sounds crazy. What is it that he's actually playing? And then you could see the chord there, and then kind of figure out what was behind the sound. Oh, this is a major set, without knowing all that kind of stuff. C sharp on a D chord sounds really good. So I'm going to make sure that I'm, so it was, to me, it was the right amount of information that was there, but without all the information, where you had to actually think about it. So to me, that was the most important educational thing that I've ever had.
Cool. Now, did you memorize a bunch of stuff out of there, or like put it in 12 keys?
Oh, yeah.
Or
No,
okay.
No 12 keys. But almost memorized the entire book.
Wow.
I never played that one at the end. Was it ballad with all those like 30 stuff? Nobody can play that. But but all the other stuff, man, I like memorized all the solos and played them verbatim when I like kind of like that blue bossa solo. That was like part of it for me. But a lot of my vocabulary and articulation was informed by what I got out of that book. But like you said, like all 12 keys, I never really did that with that information. I just used it for what it was. But I still have my original one, and I went through, and it's like you can see I like highlighted all these different things in it, and those were like my favorite, the cream of the crop kind of lines that he played. But I would learn whole solos too. Cool. So yeah.
Awesome. So who was the teacher that made the biggest impact on you, and why?
That's a tough one because there have been several for different reasons, but and some of them I would not call like formal teachers. Like it could have been one person that I really looked up to said one thing to me that kind of changed a lot. But I guess one of the people that I think helped me understand how to start working on music away from, I don't know. I don't know how to say it, but like George Garzone was one of those people. When I first got to Berklee, I did a music ed degree. So you did not really spend time in the performance area, and you only had a few semesters of private lessons. And I took 2 of them with Garzone, and he it was just like a whole different approach to playing. And he got me to start writing, where he was like, man, stop thinking about all this stuff. Just sit down and write without a piano, do this, do that. And it was kind of like, I was like, this is okay. No, that's okay. Like that, like, you know, it was like somebody that was just like telling me, yeah, try this. Doesn't matter what it sounds like now. Just keep trying it and, you know, figure it out on your own, that kind of thing. At the same time, I studied with Billy Pierce, who was on the opposite end as far as like, he was giving me all this information and like harmonic stuff that I had been kind of trying to figure out on my own and had a, you know, a version of it, but then he would clear it up for me. And I was like getting all these really crystallized ideas and like very easy ways to approach doing it. And then on the other side of things, having Garzone being like, yeah, man, you could do anything. You could play just because it's G chord, man. You could play this as a B chord. You could play it as this and just think about it as tension instead of wrong notes, you know, that kind of thing. So just like a general approach to music. And I think that's the one that where I am now has stuck with me the most in terms of like an influence.
That's great. I mean, yeah, I'm from the Boston area, and I still go and see the Fringe like on Monday nights a lot of the time. And I mean, the guy is just like some kind of wizard or sage or something. It's like you can't put your finger on it, but he's truly one of a kind.
Yeah, like I mean, like I still remember even like being excited to go in those lessons because you never know what he's gonna say. Right. Like, you know, you would walk up to the door and it would just be super quiet, and then knock, and then nothing would happen. I'd be like, well, maybe he's not in there. And then like at the door creaks a little bit and he looks out, he's like, whoa, come on in. And then it's like pitch black in there, and he's like, you know, like it's just like, man, this guy, character.
And so flipping this on its head with you in the teacher role now instead of the student role, what's one thing that you make every single student work on without exception?
Composition.
Okay.
I would say there's no more important piece of musicianship these days in terms of like working towards being a performer than being able to write your own music and create something that's unique to the way that you play and something that, you know, kind of gives your take on what you have gathered from all your influences. I think almost more important than your playing, the composition is the thing that will continue to help you grow for the rest of your life. I think for me in the last 15 years since I've been kind of touring or whatever, the thing that's helped me most is getting more knowledge about how to compose, different ways to compose, different, you know, I don't know, just successes within your own compositions that directly informs how you play. And then when you play over that music, it gives you another insight into how you view melody and harmony and all that kind of stuff. So you really find out a lot about how you play and about yourself musically through composition. So that's the most important thing to me.
Cool. And do you give your students composition assignments, or like you've got to write?
Absolutely.
Cool. That's great. All right. So the fourth one, what is one personal quality or characteristic that you feel makes people successful in the field of music?
It goes by many names, but I would say just like you could look at it as thick skin or having a sense of humor or not taking things too seriously. You know, there are always going to be things that happen in your career that are positive and things that you wish had gone another way. But if you take it all in stride and kind of believe in yourself and what you're doing, that's going to be the thing that's going to keep you going until the next success that you have or something. And not to sound like I'm like a super positive person, but like just the general vibe is like, if you're doing this as a career, you got to know it's all subjective. You know, you could play the same, like I could release this album and play it for two people and one person will hate it and one person will love it. That's one of the things that you learn really quickly. Even with, you know, going back to this album, because it's standards, I've been getting messages and emails from people like, oh, I didn't know you was about that swang, like that kind of stuff. And it's like, what does this mean? Oh, all right, you came over to the right side. No, it's just like, what does that mean? Like, I don't want to be a part of that. Like, it's just like, man, it's all music, and like, you didn't like all the other stuff I was doing, but I'm glad that you like this one. So it came for the right reason. And, you know, I think that's one of the things that you can do. Just be fearless in everything that you do and not be so worried about what the outcome is.
Right. Yeah, and I find this really often, especially I feel like in the jazz world, musicians are like some of the funniest people that I've ever met. And I think a lot of it has to do with it. Like you're really putting yourself out there all the time. And along with that fearlessness comes that you have to kind of have a sense of humor to deal with what comes back at you sometimes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, you know, like getting up and speaking in front of people, you know, a lot of times those things are reserved for presidents or, you know, like lectures or something where you're usually the most informed person about what you're doing in the room. But music, you know, musician, you see some people talk and they can barely put sentences together, but they're still doing it. You see some of the clothes people wear and it's just like, man, that's crazy. First of all, to wear in public, but then to get up on a stage and wear, everybody is just expressing themselves. So it is a really unique situation.
That's beautiful, man. All right. So my final question, what is the best musical purchase under or around $100 that you've made in the past year? And this could be like anything related to music. It doesn't have to be something for the saxophone, anything. This is a question I got from Tim Ferriss, who does like more of a business style podcast, but I always really, really appreciate the answers. So is there anything you can point to?
Man, $100.
Yeah, just something that's like accessible to most folks that you feel like has been.
Well, the honest answer, best thing that I've spent $100 on was getting some pads replaced on my horn.
Okay.
But that's pretty saxophone specific.
Yeah, but that's all right. I mean, this is a saxophone podcast, so.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, there's a great repairman near where I teach in Indiana by the name of Steve Georges, and he has like hooked me up several times where I've been like, I don't know what's going on, but like for some reason my F won't come out, and I'll take it to him and he'll be like, oh, if you look right here, there's actually no pad. So
so you might want to get that fixed.
Yeah. So, you know, putting some money into instrument maintenance has been very eye-opening in the last year or so. I would love to give you a better answer, though.
No, man, that works.
Okay. We'll go there then.
Works. Cool. Well, Walter, thanks so much for coming on, man, taking the time to talk to us. And where can people get in touch with you if they want to reach out?
Through my website, which is waltersmith3.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks, man. We really appreciate it. And thanks again for speaking with us.
You got it. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it, man.
Walter Smith III, everybody. He's a really great guy. I don't know about you, but I was laughing through the entire interview, and he also dropped some serious knowledge on us while keeping it really fun and just a great conversation. I could talk to that guy all day, and there's never a dull moment with Walter. So thanks again for tuning in. Remember to go and hit the website. Remember to leave us a rating and review if you are enjoying these shows. We really, really appreciate that. And that, of course, gets us out so that we're discoverable to a lot of other folks out there. Remember to hit the website and find the playlist that I'm making of Walter's music. You can check that out at saxophonepodcast.com. While you're there, you can jump on the mailing list and a bunch of other really cool stuff there, including reviews and all things related to the saxophone. Remember to drop us a line and let us know who you would like to hear interviewed on these shows. We love suggestions. It helps us when we reach out to people if we know who the listeners want to hear, and then we can kind of go from there. Again, we want to make the show relevant to you. We want to talk with saxophone players that you're really dying to kind of get to know a little bit better and get inside the head of. So make sure you drop us a line, Everything Saxophone Podcast at gmail.com, or you can leave us a message on our Facebook page, or you can leave us a message on the website. Pretty much anywhere, we definitely get those messages, and we will respond to them and take any suggestions that you guys have into account. All right, hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. We will see you guys next week. And yeah, have a great one. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.